It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogside Network, the show where we look at the dollars and cents of the sports media business industrial complex in all of its shady portfolio, public, private equity, foreign investments, all media contracts welcome world. How you doing, Steve?
A bit of foreshadowing there, perhaps, for where we're headed in the show. No, I all is well. We're doing this on very early on Saturday, Labor Day weekend. So I certainly hope that everyone out there has had a good holiday weekend. And I don't really know what we're supposed to be celebrating for this day. I never have, but whatever it is, I hope you've celebrated in an adequate fashion.
I think we're celebrating the fact that we have weekends at all, probably.
Well, it's
all
like,
right.
Are we celebrating a labor union? Hopefully not, because I don't want to celebrate that. Are we celebrating the fact that everybody has to work? It's along the lines of President's Day. What are we really celebrating for President's Day?
I actually think the origins are actually explicitly celebrating the labor movement. I mean, I think I've actually done. I like to study holidays on my free time, and that is actually the origin.
And so you're gonna have cause me to check out of. I may work just to spite the holiday. How about that?
That would be on brand. The rest of you can thank that progressive era for your weekend.
Okay, Mr. Smart guy. Then what about President's Day? Because I have a theory on President's Day.
President's Day is so boring that I didn't even actually look into it. Although the history of Memorial Day is fascinating.
Well, the President's Day, here's my theory on President's Day. Washington and Lincoln's birthday is in February, both of them. And in decades past, the holiday day would rotate between Washington's birthday and Lincoln's birthday. And I think that the federal government basically got tired of that and just combined it all and called it President's Day without any real firm guidance on what we're supposed to be celebrating. Because half these presidents I don't want to celebrate. But I think that's all it is. It's a compromise between Washington and Lincoln. That's what I think.
I think it's just a Monday off.
Well, definitely it's just a Monday off, but I mean,
but did you know there were competing Memorial Days for a good stretch of time?
No, but I would know what. So tell me.
Because there was the Confederate Memorial Day and there was the, federal government / union Memorial Day, and those, coming at a sort of, Reconstruction era, and then coming out of the Reconstruction era, they competed. I think I don't quote me on this, but I think even into the early 1900s, there was a day that was Memorial Day in the South for Confederate soldiers, and then obviously everybody else. And then they've obviously eventually combined, but they competed for a good amount of time.
By all means, let's celebrate those people who took up arms against this country.
No, it was a little bit bizarre, but it actually was pretty. It's one of the more fascinating, like, why do we have this Monday and why is it this day stories?
See, you don't live in the South, so
well, I was born in Virginia.
Okay, so you kind of do. Maybe you have seen this a little bit, which is that people from the South are very protective of the Confederate legacy, and they're not even necessarily pro slavery or anything like that, but they're very protective of the legacy. And my response has always been, these are the people that literally committed treason. I don't know why we're celebrating a single one of them. Why is Robert E. Lee a hero? And none of that and I just, none of it makes sense.
Well, we should do a side podcast on the implications and repercussions of the post-Civil War era, because many of our 21st century issues are embedded in that 30-year period after the Civil War.
Yeah, no, you're right. It'd be interesting. It wouldn't be sports, but it'd be interesting.
No. But Reconstruction era is one of those things that everyone just likes to brush past because it's kind of complicated, but it's actually the bouillabaisse of modern America.
There's a lot to it. It's not just complicated. It's very complicated.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to celebrate Andrew Johnson for President's Day. See, I'll bring it all the way back.
There you go. See, that's what I'm talking about.
Guy was a clown. All right. Well, I'm sure. The large majority of our audience is not interested in a treatise on Andrew Johnson's reign as president. So we can jump into what people probably are cared about. And by the time you're listening to this, it'll be NFL kickoff week. Who knows when you'll exactly listen, but this will get released. The Thursday kickoff game, all of the hoopla. Then you roll into, the Sunday game. So let's look at the league a little bit. Something Steve and I have talked about for a long time, talked about it in the last show, predicted this was probably going to happen. I think we even named the date of the meeting that it would probably be ratified. But the NFL has created a path to private equity to NFL ownership. This has been clear for a while, and those of us that are Washington fans really understand this because we saw what it took to get to the $6 billion number. And as we saw recently from some valuation estimates, that however you want to describe it, NFL team will be probably north of that $6 billion. And it just is not trivial to get to that number. So welcome to private equity firms, probably foreign investments then bundled in there into NFL ownership. And we're off to the races to 10 billion. That's what I think this kicks off. The race to 10 billion when are we going to hit 10 billion for the next NFL sale?
Well, yeah, what it also is a race to is a lot more private equity than what they're talking about now.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, just keep creaking the door open.
This is the gateway drug, okay? Yeah. This is the kid in high school who smokes a joint, and the next thing you know, he's addicted to crystal meth. That is what this is, okay? Because believe me, this is just the beginning. The NFL set all kinds of parameters on this, and once you set parameters are basically made to be broken. In business, again, I mean, the comp for this is gambling. 10 years ago, the NFL was totally out of gambling. It's anathema to the NFL, and you can't get anywhere near it. And now they have partnerships with them and all these ridiculous things. There's a lot of stories on this. Chris found a good one in Sports Business Journal I couldn't access. The one I'm looking at is from ESPN. It says NFL owners approve private equity investment by Michael Rothstein, August 27, 2024. And so this was apparently something called Resolution JC7, allows private equity funds to purchase up to 10% of any franchise or passive ownership. That's the basics. That's the basic. But the more interesting part is all the details of it. So I think the first and just most fascinating thing, it says funds are capped at investing in a maximum of 6 teams. Think about that. I mean, yeah, right. No, they're not going to let any other owner buy multiple stakes and
should be one.
Yeah, I know. Why are private equity funds allowed to do 6 teams? That's just bizarre to me. And then it says the minimum investment for any institutional wealth in any franchise is 3%. Why 3%? Why is there any minimum? Why couldn't they put $1,000 in if the ownership wanted to do that? I don't understand the point of having a minimum. Really. And then there's a minimum term. They must hold on to the investment for a minimum of 6 years. From a capital perspective, they must have a minimum of $2 billion of committed capital to invest, and then a maximum of 20% of a fund's money can be invested into any one team, meaning that they can't invest. They can't create. So they don't want people to create a private equity fund and invest the entire thing into a team and have it just be like the NFL private equity fund. So they're looking for legit large scale private equity funds that have money. Well, we'll save the commentary here. And so then they've actually pre-identified, is it 4? Yeah, 4 potential groups, 4 potential existing funds. One is something called, stop me if you've heard of any of these, Arctos Partners, Sixth Street Partners, Eris Management, and a consortium that's comprised of Dynasty Equity, Blackstone, which I think I've heard of. The Carlyle
I've definitely
Group,
heard of Blackstone.
Carlyle Group, I think I've heard of.
Definitely.
Yeah, CVC Capital Partners, which I've not, and Ludus, which is run by former Jets Hall of Fame running back Curtis Martin. Like, who knew that guy had financial sense? Let's stop right there. And there's more to this, but Chris, you can go into the Oh, I'm sorry. The sovereign wealth funds are excluded from this for now. So, the Saudis, the Qatar, the one that's run by the Qatari government, the Qatar Investment Authority, the Saudi one that's running Live Golf, they're cut out for now.
That'll be the
But
next. That'll be the next.
I was exactly where
Yeah,
I was going with that.
Rubicon.
Yeah, because what they can do, they can buy up to 7.5% of an approved fund. So they can have like an indirect investment. But let's stop there. Your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting. They sort of pre-negotiated the terms of the sale, right? Their involvement. So like everything else the NFL does, this is really like a central headquarters type of move, right? So they basically came up with the term sheet for any team that wants to sell to private equity to some degree already. So it's a kind of a template for how they'll be involved in any of these sales. So I found that level of detail pretty interesting. They're not really leaving much up to the individual teams here. You're basically, here's the private equity contract team, have them sign our deal here. And I agree. It's kind of interesting. One of the things I think they did is, I don't think this is a dipping a toe in the water. I think this is dangling your feet over the side, but you can see whether it's the sovereign wealth funds, whether it's just the amount, those things, you can see where they've designed it so that they can keep creeping up, right? Start it low enough where the next jump in any of those things won't seem that ridiculous. But I find that the same thing you tripped on is what I'd trip on. 6. That's just crazy. I mean, you imagine, let's say, let's just, because one that we know about pretty easily, like the Carlyle Group, which I know is part of the consortium, but just for the sake of argument, it's just like, oh, you're here's our NFL portfolio. We've got a little bit of the Rams, we've got a little bit of the Lions, we've got a little bit of, I mean, that's crazy.
Oh, it's not. It's yeah. The league has intentionally structured its ownership up to this point. It's intentionally constructed its ownership verification and rules to ensure maximum competitiveness on field. That has always been the most important thing in their approving owners. I mean, it's one of the reasons why they didn't approve Howard Milstein 30 years ago, if everybody recalls. And now they're going to let a bunch of private equity not only but invest in several different teams simultaneously. And believe me, I mean, your analogy was, dipping a toe in the water as opposed to jumping in, but the jumping in the water is coming. Okay, this is only the beginning. What you're going to see in the next couple of years is the percentage of investment can go up because, by the way, this 10% is the lowest of any major league. Then NBA can invest up to 30%. We're going to see it rapidly grow up into 30, more than 10. It wouldn't surprise me if someday they just let private equity just own a majority stake someday soon. Why are they so? It's the NFL compromising themselves for the sake of money. That's what it is. And the value of this is, it's obvious that we said this before, there's only a handful of people in the world that can write a check for $6 billion. And if Washington's worth $6 billion, like the Patriots or the 49ers or somebody would be worth 8 to 10. And that's what you said earlier. And there's just not enough people who can do that. And it's a lot and it takes a lot of money, time to raise, billions of dollars in capital out of nowhere. You can't, they have to raise that in months because these teams come on the market and they're sold rapidly. It's not a long-term deal. So that's why they're doing it. It's infusing capital in the league, but I think they're kind of compromising their integrity a little bit with this, especially the number of teams thing.
Yeah, that part. I mean, the rest was, kind of coming obvious. That wrinkle I found a little bit shocking for sure in terms of like, okay, where are we going here? But yeah, these things are expensive. And I think that when they started to sense what the new ceiling was, it means you're going to build another level so you can push that ceiling.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Obviously. I mean, this is just the ground floor of this thing. And yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
And, especially when you think about, I think about the Rams. Not that Kroenke is trying to sell. But you know what he's built in terms of like the Palace Stadium self-owned, right? Like, you know, so, you know, especially when you consider that these combo deals are going to become more and more prevalent, you know, that just is going to push the price up even more. One thing that was very obvious in every article we read was that there's basically contract term sheets ready to roll as soon as this rule change was put in place and the details were known. Although I'm sure the people that were negotiating on these sales knew what the probable outlines of the new rules were going to be.
Oh, of course they did. This wasn't a surprise.
So you'll see now that no one said team names or anything, but I think it's pretty clear that in the next month, I'll even give them a little bit of wiggle room. In the next month, we'll start to see, you know, some team already have a sale to sell the whatever it is 6% of it over to a private equity. There's deal sheets ready to roll right now.
Of course there are. and you know, I think the question for the future is right now the NFL is implying this is a passive investment, but how long is it going to stay a passive investment? You know, how long is it going to be before we see, you know, the Bengals? Well, of course, they're the team that voted against this. A bad example, but like, I don't know, the Minnesota Vikings changed their name from the Vikings to the Minnesota, you know, Carlisle Vikings or something, you know, group Vikings. What is the line going to be for this? The NFL is going to say, you know, it will have no impact of the product on the field and blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's what they're going to say. But how long will it be before all this changes? It's going to be rapid. I'm telling you, the sovereign investment, you know, the sovereign wealth funds, they're coming. It's only a matter of time, but, you know, before I think it's the only way the league sees to have a path forward for sustained growth is to allow private equity. That's ultimately why I'm doing this.
100%. It is pretty interesting that it was 31-1 with the Bengals being the lone holdout. And one thing that was in the Sports Business Journal, which is an interesting wrinkle, is they basically did have to buy off a chunk of owners probably to get to whatever majority number they needed to pass the resolution. And so there is a piece where, so let's keep the Vikings. Let's say the Vikings want to sell 3% of their ownership stake to private equity. The sale of that, there's a percentage of it that kicks back to the league. So there, you know, and then runs into the, you know, the one for all for one viewpoint of the NFL. So the league / the league owners are getting a payoff every time somebody decides to sell their small percentage, as of now, off to private equity. So there was obviously, that was the sweetener that moved enough owners over into yes.
Well, just throw some cash at you and, you know, buy you off.
Why were the Bengals a holdout?
You got to understand who the Bengals owner is. So, okay.
Yeah, he's a nut job, but still he likes money.
But he's a nut job.
Yeah, I guess.
You know, he is. This is the same team where, you know, if I recall, I can't remember what player it was, but several years ago, one of the players said he had to go out and buy a whole pile of male athletic supporters for his team because the team didn't
have enough jock straps.
Yes. Yes. And they wanted to give everybody used athletic supporters. You know, the guy's just really strange. It's his family business. You know, it's like the kids. I think there's a daughter. I can't remember. I looked into this. I wrote a piece on all the ownership structures in the NFL a few years ago. He's just a very, very weird guy. That's partly why the Bengals they fell into Joe Burrow here, but they've been a train wreck as an organization for a generation or more.
No, any success they have in the field is almost a little.
It's an accident. Special. It's an accident. That's right.
But yeah, so I think everyone wins in terms of how the NFL thinks about it. I'm not saying that generally, but like you know, 31-1 is a pretty strong indication of how.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, do you want to make more money? Does it? Yeah. You know, and to be honest, I don't have a huge problem with private equity having a minority stake. I don't think, from a fan's perspective, I don't think it really matters that much right now, at least. It might matter if they're allowed to have a majority stake, because then truly it becomes a battle of what's more important. And when for private equity, it's always going to be money. It's never going to be the product on the field. Although the dirty little secret is for the vast majority of the owners, that's what's important anyway.
Right.
They just don't want to say
it
it out
connects to the
loud.
existing model.
Yeah, they don't want to say it out loud though, and they'd have to say the quiet part out loud if you allow a private equity to literally own a majority stake.
Yeah, no doubt. And it'll be, and plus, now is this just the way the world works? Maybe.
If you
Possibly.
have a $6 to $8, $10 billion product, it's the way the world works.
Right. Or is it a boiling frog situation? Even for fans, because, eventually like what this does to the sport, what this does to the league. So, like in 15 or 20 years, are we looking back to if we do have the Blackstone Vikings, Black Rock Vikings, then that's a problem, right? That's a boiling frog situation where everyone looks back and says, how did we get here? And well, to that, this, this issue we're talking about, this rule change is going to be a stepping stone to how we got there.
Well, that and gambling, I think those two things, if you really want to talk about the future of the league, that's what we're talking about here. Okay. Because again, fundamentally, none of the fans, us normal folk who don't have billions of dollars, who cares? But why it matters is how the league is governed, what they do with the product, how they present the product to the public. That is governed by the owners. And if the owners are private equity guys who are only focused on maximizing profits, it could come to the point where it compromises the product on the field in that it will change the dynamic with the players union. It'll change the way that maybe the product is presented to the public. In terms of media, that's what I'm talking about. Media contracts, all that could change. And yeah, I think in a decade, you could look back to this moment and say, this is the moment that it all changed. If it changes, this is going to be the moment that it did.
Yeah, and there's no guarantee there.
No.
They have a pretty good lockdown on their league, so they do control the rules to a degree right now. But they control their collective greed. That's really where the sort of that's the gray area.
Well, the other thing is right now the NFL has a bunch of really old dudes who own a lot of these teams, and nobody lives forever, unfortunately. And once those people are gone and they're replaced by new, younger people, whether it's family members or whatever, attitudes can change. Right now, it's a bunch of old white dudes for the most part that own these teams and who are already billionaires. The next crop may not feel the same in terms of league governance as these guys who've been here for 30 years in some cases do. It could be a sea change.
100%. And actually, I think, and I don't just say this because of the sort of Washington nature of this, although I think the Washington franchise is a big piece of why we're here, actually. But Josh Harris is actually a fascinating one to watch for a few reasons. One, he's not a young man, but he's certainly not like an old geezer, right? And he comes from
not by NFL standards.
He comes to the world of private equity and running these kind of things himself. He had to overextend himself to buy the team, and there's still a lot of high price tickets that he's got to, whether it's Northwest Stadium improvements or it's the new stadium or, just recouping his losses and paying his investors. He's got some big bills to pay. So I think Josh Harris, and he's probably, and he could probably buy off a couple people at the bottom end right now, or just bring on more owners at this point, so I think I could see Josh Harris being one of these petri dishes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Josh Harris has a smaller percentage of the ownership of the Washington franchise than almost any other owner in the league.
Right.
And there's a reason for it. It's not because he didn't have money. It's because the price he paid was so much higher than anyone else. You got to remember, like Bob Kraft probably paid, it was 30 years ago at least, probably more that Kraft bought the team. What did he pay? 100 million, 200 million at most?
Well, even just looking at Snyder and Harris and the differential between that just tells you everything you need to
know. Right. Yeah, exactly right. It's just night and day. So, yes, I think that when I said young, I didn't necessarily mean like 30s. By NFL owner standards, Josh Harris being what, teenager, 60 or something? Is he? Yeah. He's a young guy, and he's going to be around for 20 years probably. So he's one of the guys that may drive this in the future. So I don't think we necessarily know the future of this, except to say the rules will expand, will become more loose. They're going to allow a higher percentage. At some point, they're going to allow sovereign wealth funds in, and they're going to pretend like they're vetting them somehow, but they really won't. It's exactly like gambling. Like I said, it's the same thing here. It's shockingly enough, it's just business, Chris.
Yeah.
It's all
just
about money. Yeah.
So actually, we'll transition here because it's a nice transition moment into our next story, which actually has it actually has more connections than, doesn't seem like that big a pivot in stories. And that is this, well, it came out this week in a number of outlets that if Tom Brady's ownership stake in the Las Vegas Raiders moves forward, and he's in the booth as Fox's new head, handsomely paid color commentator, pushing the much superior Greg Olson out of the way, which I think is a giant mistake, but that's a different subject. And I hope Olson gets the last laugh here. But basically, if he is a Raider owner at whatever percentage, who cares? That's the league is slapping a ton of restrictions on how he can cover the game. Now, what that means is he's not allowed to be inside the building of the home team on the broadcast. He can't be in production meetings. He can't do the coach and key player meet and greets and sit downs. He can't, basically anything involved with the production of the thing he's being paid hundreds of millions of dollars to do, he can't do. He basically shows up at the booth, whatever, at some pre-allotted amount of time before kickoff, and goes in cold into the game. I have to say, there's so many implications to this, but if you have to put on, the baseline for me is if you have to put on this level of restrictions just to execute the broadcast, just say no. Why is Fox? Why is NFL? Why are they twisting themselves? And we know why they're twisting themselves into knots, but is he worth it? At some point, just say, okay, you can be a owner or you can be a broadcaster. You can't do both.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Brady basically becomes me and Alex and Dave Earl doing the hog sty.
Right,
I mean,
without any action,
just show. Yeah, exactly. And as an aside, I don't actually think Tom Brady's going to be that great at broadcasting.
We don't even know if he's any good.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't seem to have a gregarious personality. No, obviously, he knows football clearly, but yeah, he's kind of stiff. But they just want him there because of the name. It's Tom Brady, and that's in the story. So, if you want to read about this, Bleacher Report had this. NFL says Tom Brady joining Raiders ownership would lead to severe TV restrictions by Zach Bakar or Batcher, one of those two, August 28th, 2024. Now, everybody needs to understand that Tom Brady has an extremely large contract with Fox. It's 10 years, I believe it was $375 million. Yeah, 10 years.
Fox signed way too early. That was so dumb. Now, that's why they're in these, whether it's Greg Olson.
Well, my question here is Fox needs to get their attorney on the phone, read the contract, and determine whether or not the contract allows this to happen.
Yes,
okay,
100%.
Is this a default? Can he meet? I'm sure the terms of his employment say that he has to do all appropriate due diligence to be ready for the games, to include participation in meetings and all that other stuff. If he can't do that, I don't know how he can be a broadcaster. And is it really that important to Tom Brady to be a 2% share owner of the Raiders? Because I can promise you it's not a huge stake. Okay. Tom Brady does not have the money. Even Tom Brady, who might be the richest, well, before his divorce from Giselle, at least,
right?
Maybe not anymore, but he was probably the richest NFL player, probably at least one of them.
Here's how I'd say it. He's going to have less of an ownership stake in the Raiders than Magic Johnson does in the Commanders. Yeah.
Oh, clearly so. Yeah. And the same with Johnson and the Dodgers. I mean, he doesn't have he's a name, period. Is it really so important to Tom Brady? I think, and Fox, I'm not being facetious at all about Fox needs to get their attorneys on the phone and come up with an argument. And what I would advise them if I were their legal counsel is we got to send Tom Brady a letter that says, you do this and you're going to be in default to your contract. Do you really want to endanger $375 million just to be a vanity owner of the Raiders?
Also, and maybe it's the Labor Day weekend in me, but also, and I know that no one cares about the little guy or even the sort of kind of upper middle guy here, but there's a lot of work, a lot of professionals, a lot that goes into putting on, especially the A broadcast for the network, right? Which is what Tom Brady will be on for Fox. He's going to be on the marquee game. Whatever the marquee game is what he's going to be, him and Burkhart are going to be assigned to. So Everybody, the line producers, the camera operators, the researchers, Kevin Burkhardt, the producers of the broadcast. This is a well-oiled machine, So what are you saying to everybody else who works
I
tirelessly
know
to
what
put
you're.
these
It's
productions
saying
on?
you're not that important to me. That's what it's
Yeah,
saying.
it's just like it's okay, someone that we've never done the job, that we paid an obscene amount of money to too early, and by the way, we're breaking up what was considered probably to be the best team in NFL broadcasting, on the route to that. That the production.
The most well and high profile team, at least.
Well, I mean, I would rather listen to Olsen than
I thought you were talking about Brady. Oh yeah, Olsen.
no. I'm saying
Olsen,
I'm saying like that they were the media darling. They were the considered really the emergent and probably best A-level team that they're now somehow breaking up. This has got to be poisonous within the crew that puts this game on.
Oh yeah. Now it's got to be said. The Bleacher Report article mentions that Brady's ownership stake is stuck in NFL finance committee. Hasn't been approved yet.
I think probably having this sorted might have been a blocker.
Absolutely. And Fox needs to put pressure on the NFL too. Say, look, we're a major media partner with you, and you are allowing this to happen would do great damage to our ability to broadcast your A-level games.
We are barring your celebrity color commentary person from stepping across the boundaries of our facility.
Yeah. And now this column kind of alludes to this. And it says the rules for Brady's upcoming broadcasting career were presented to owners on Tuesday and would only affect the former New England Patriots signal caller. Owners raised several questions regarding potential conflict of interest in Brady's partial ownership role.
Potential.
Yeah, it's not a potential conflict of interest. It's an open and obvious and clear cut conflict of interest role. Because the NFL is right. I mean, you can't let the owner of the Raiders into the facility, into like the Chargers facility.
Tell me, Kansas City Chief. Tell me, Andy
exactly.
Reid. What is your emerging philosophy about how to
how do you stop Justin Herbert with the chart?
Right.
Yeah. It's clear it's a conflict. I think Tom Brady needs to be smarter than this. He can't have it all. Like Peyton Manning is doing it right. Peyton Manning intentionally doesn't want to be in a booth. He's kind of doing his own thing. We saw that he's now going to do a show with Bill Belichick, which I think is hilarious.
It's all through his production company, which is above board. And he then licenses that out to these media companies to produce his shows, like any production company in media.
Yes. But he could do that, and he could buy an ownership stake in that and still do like a little show on the side. It wouldn't be a conflict of interest because he's not broadcasting games. So
that's a lot of people. I would just quickly, and I don't know everything, obviously, I don't even know much on this, but basically that team shows up, kind of Wednesday, Thursday. They are curated through a whole list of
the
players
broadcast
and
team
coaches.
You're talking about?
In the production team. Then they go through and they look at story angles. They're researchers. Like this is a every piece of that is highly intentional.
Well, yeah. My understanding is that's what happens. They show up Wednesday, Thursday. They meet with both teams. They do a deep dive in depth in it. This is not just like these dudes showing up on Saturday night and rolling in on Sunday morning. I mean, it is, and they have tons of highlight packages and clips set up. There's a whole crew, as you said, that does all the data and the stats and production teams, and they do pre-interviews and, like they go watch practices and all that. It is a major production. And if Tom Brady can't do that, basically means it's going to default to what I just said, which is show up Saturday, roll in there, just kind of wing it and do the best we can, which is again what Alex Cease and Dave Rowe and I would do, because we're just a little thing. That is wrong. But I would not put up with that if I were Fox News, and I refuse to believe that this contract is so loose in its language that it allows for this. It has to say you have to be available to do all of the pre-production background stuff. It has to say that. So I think Fox not only ought to put pressure on Brady, they need to put pressure on the NFL. We are your major broadcast, probably your two longest broadcast partners between Fox and CBS, and we demand that you don't let this happen. What a way to start off with your new employer, though, right?
Yeah. You're gonna put one of those prison ankle bracelets on you to track whether you cross any NFL boundaries at any point before Sunday at 11 a.m.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, you go be a vice president at McDonald's Corporation while simultaneously being on the vegan advocacy group or something.
Yeah, yeah, right. Beyond Burgers everywhere.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it.
It makes zero sense. I really hope this doesn't happen. And it's another real. And then you tie it back a little bit to the last story. It's just like, where do the lines end? Right? We're just blurring everything. Right? Everything's doable. And obviously the point of our show and all that. So we get that, but it's just like at some point, like even if they're dotted lines, you got to hold on to them.
Well, yes. The NFL's compromised a lot, though, as we said. We just mentioned in our last segment the private equity. I mentioned gambling. Now this, but this is different though than the investment in the NFL. This is something that can be easily fixed. And just say, Tom, sorry, you can't do this. End of story. You need to pick one. And if Tom was smart, he's going to pick the 10-year, $375 million contract.
Yeah, that keeps him in the limelight too, which he seems to like. So,
but again, I don't think he's going to be very good, though.
I don't either. But what is, I think my prediction is he'll be fine out of the gate, right? And people and
well, hasn't even been approved yet, so yeah,
right. Let's say this. But if let's say it kicked in this Sunday. I think whenever that first batch of games he does, right? Let's say like half a season, 6-8 games, something like that. There'll be the sort of, how is he? There'll be the, whether there's a car wreck, whatever, he's still so connected to the game and the players that are on the field that he'll have some insights, but that'll be a short-term high. I think, because once you get into the slog of it, and into the routine of it without all of those, 30, 40 years tested ways to broadcast these games. And TV has made the NFL. Let's not forget that. These are, it's a TV sport. There would be no dominance of the NFL if it wasn't for how it broadcast on TV. So once he gets 6-8 games in without those safety nets and without that process, it'll be emperor with no clothes at some point.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to watch an NFL game without the broadcast on?
It's hard for me. I agree.
It is hard. Yeah. I have had to do that in years past before I figured out how to steal the internet signal to Redskins games. I would go to these sports bars to watch, and the sound's always off. At least it was always on like another game. And I think what I'm saying is I think the broadcast team is actually an integral part of the presentation of the game. You don't necessarily have to have a big name, but you do have to have people who are good, who can talk the audience through what's happening. And clearly, like Brady obviously knows football a zillion times more than the fans. What we're saying about him not being good isn't that. It's like he just doesn't seem to be one who can present well on camera. That's what it is.
Well, they don't pay these, especially the top guys. They don't pay him tens of millions of dollars because it doesn't matter to the broadcast.
No. I mean, they pay him top money because he's Tom Brady.
No, I'm saying in general, they pay. These guys. They make good money because it's important, right?
Yes.
Because so that's why but you look at someone like Greg Olsen, right? Borderline Hall of Famer, great career. If you're a football nerd, you know who Greg Olsen is, right? But Greg Olsen wasn't the kind of name he worked himself up. He was on the C game, then he worked himself up to the B game, then he worked himself up to the A team, the A game. And why? Because he was good at the job. It wasn't just because he's Greg Olsen. No one, what? No one.
No, but Tom Brady is a pop culture, phenomenon.
Yeah, sure, but like as we said, but that he could really suck. We've seen, OJ is his own thing, but we've seen.
You don't use OJ as an example.
That's probably bad. But we've seen athletes jump to the booth, and it doesn't matter how big a star they sucked.
Clinton Portis.
Oh, poor Clinton, but he never made it to the big leagues in terms.
No, he didn't. But I mean, that was the guy who we all love, Clinton Portis, in Washington, but he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer from an intellectual standpoint. And it really, for those of you who have forgotten, he was the sideline guy for Redskins preseason games up until the point in time in which he went to jail, and then that's, yeah. But it's just, he comes across as a dumb guy, and he's just not that good at it, even though he's a big name and he's colorful and he's personable. I mean, he's just not that smart, it comes across. And that happens to broadcasters sometimes. But in the case of Brady, they want Brady out there because if Tom Brady could be a mute and they would have him out there doing sign language. Okay. Cause he's a big name. It doesn't matter. They want the name Tom Brady out there. That's why he's getting the gig, the number one gig immediately without having broadcast the game.
No,
and
they
so
had this contract. He like announced his retirement, or this whatever, the third retirement, and the contract was like the next Monday.
Yeah, obviously he'd been negotiating it. You don't come out with contract like this in 5 minutes. And I mean, what is Mark Davis with the Raiders? Why is this important to him? He doesn't need this money. He doesn't need Tom Brady's money. You really
nut jobs.
Yeah. He's once removed from the ultimate nut job, and somehow, in Al Davis, and somehow Mark seems dumber than his father. Like the apple
Al Davis is crazy as a fox. Mark is crazy like a rock.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and Mark is just not a bright guy, and so he wants Brady with the Raiders for marketing reasons. Simple as that. He doesn't need Tom Brady's money. He could go find anybody that could come out there to buy 2% or whatever small percentage he's buying.
I wonder if it'll ever come out, and it won't be anytime soon, but it'll be like months, maybe even a few years, of how much Kraft has been backstage. Again, because I mean, this has got to piss Kraft off a little bit, just the Raiders part of it, like what, and then and also they're kind of, the fractious relationship with the Patriots since he left. I wonder how much Kraft is pulling levers to make this as hard as possible.
Well, maybe a little bit. Yeah. I mean, because Kraft could have offered Brady a cut of the Patriots.
Right.
He could have offered him a 2% vanity cut. Did not. It's funny to see that group of people, Kraft, Belichick, and Brady, just kind of imploded there. They didn't walk out the conquering heroes at all. They got mad at Belichick, fired him. Brady and Belichick were mad at each other. Brady had this weird trainer guy, like mystic trainer dude, in the building, remember, that the Patriots didn't like and threw him out. And, it really kind of fell apart at the end, which is funny.
Yeah.
I think.
And Belichick's going to come out smelling the best just because he's now turning into a media star.
Another guy who looks like, Belichick is pretending. Belichick does not present well on camera either. He hasn't, but I think he's just kind of trolling everybody. I think he actually is more personable than he appears.
Oh, I definitely think so.
But Brady is not. Brady's a block of wood when it comes to television, production.
People always said that there was the thing about Belichick was, there was the Belichick, the coach, which was was a one thing, and he played it well. But then and then he kind of put that suit on and took that suit off. And then in other parts of his life, he was actually like a well-rounded, kind of interesting person. And so I think I totally agree. I think he was the Belichick persona as coach that everyone got, going all the way back to the Giants and then the Browns head coach, for a long bit of time, was a well manicured thing. Now that he doesn't care, he doesn't have any overlords, he doesn't have to worry about it. Media darling, personable Belichick comes out. Now he's all over the TV.
Did you see, this has nothing to do with the story, but did you see this is what I get for watching YouTube, the video of Bill Belichick, shirtless Bill Belichick, doing a walk of shame out of his 25-year-old girlfriend's house? Oh my God. I mean, it's just the funniest thing ever. You really got to watch. I mean, because Belichick's in his mid 70s right now. It's just funny, but it has nothing to do with the story. So I don't know. I think we covered it. So prediction, here's my prediction. Brady is going to decline to buy he's going to withdraw from the purchase of the Raiders, the portion of the Raiders. That's what I think. I don't think Fox is going to let this happen. I think you're going to see Brady's going to say, I decided not to, and withdraw, and that's going to be the end of it.
I actually agree with you, although I think it's going to be the flip. I think all the reasons will be the same, but I think it'll be he chooses the ownership stake.
Oh, you do? Oh,
yeah,
okay. You think he's going to?
He knows he's not going to be any good at it. So part of me is he thinks he signed that contract too early. And okay. I think but I think basically I'm agreeing with you. I just think it might end up
being the other way around. You think he's going to go? So we'll see. We have a little gentleman's bet here going. Tommy is not going to be able to do both. I think he's going to pick the broadcasting. Chris thinks he's going to do the Raider thing. The reason why I think he's going to pick broadcasting gives him something to do. Owning a 3% stake of the Raiders doesn't give anything to do. Yeah, it's just vanity. And so I think Brady's probably the type of guy he needs, especially remember he had just had a divorce, like a very public, ugly divorce. He probably needs something to do. Like the downfall of many football players is when they leave the NFL then they don't have anything to do, and they're uneducated and they don't have any, anything going, especially they don't have a family or whatever, and they fall into hard times and bad things. Not that Brady's going to go down that road, but I think Brady's the guy who needs something to do. So that's why I picked mine. So we will see who's right, and we'll all owe you like a fake lunch or something. I mean, we live in different parts of the country, but we'll keep it on the books.
And the reality is that probably everyone overextends themselves to make this happen, and this sort of abomination moves on.
Yeah.
That's actually the probable outcome. Well, speaking of giant media deals for current and ex NFL athletes, the Kelce brothers just this past week signed kind of an eye-popping contract with Amazon's Wondery podcast network. Basically, they got a cool $100 million to continue. Continue their New Heights podcast underneath the Wondery banner. And that's kind of a wow moment. $100 million to continue to sit at their computer desk and goof off together as brothers. Entertainingly. I'm not even denigrating it, but that's a good payday for that activity.
Yeah. So this is another Bleacher Report story called Report. Travis, Jason Kelce land $100 million plus for New Heights podcast to move to Wondery by Mike Chiari, who I believe we've done stories from before, August 27, 2024. Now, the difference between Travis and Jason Kelce and Tom Brady are that these two guys are very personable, in like a gruff, dumb athlete kind of way. But I have one question for you, Chris. Do you think the fact is this deal in part due to which one is it, Travis or Jason's connection to Taylor Swift? Well, I forget which one it is.
Travis. The current one's still playing. I mean, Jason, this is his first year of retirement from the Eagles, which I think will have actually significant impact on the Eagles.
But it's the Eagles. It's a Kansas City one.
Yes.
So and I'm not being facetious here. What I'm saying is the fact that Travis is much more in the news media and in public, kind of the public consciousness, for lack of a better term, now because of his connection to Taylor Swift. Does that give Wondery more comfort to give them this much money?
Do I think, is it a piece of the factor about the kind of cultural phenomenon that the Kelce brothers are at this point, which would obviously be why you'd get these kind of contracts? Yes. But I mean, it is important to say that podcast was huge pre Taylor Swift. So they, to your original point, really, this is paying someone because they've got a track record, right? Because they've got a built, so that's a little different. So I think there was enough there. Now, are we talking about the difference between a $60 million, $75 million contract and $100 million contract because of the sort of like overall, like pop cultural, royal flush? Maybe. I think it's a factor, but I think the probability that we're sitting here talking about a contract with Wondery for the podcast would still be the same. I think, but maybe the dollar amount would be lower.
That's fair.
I don't think a huge amount lower.
No, that's fair. Cause this is a very popular podcast and these two guys are good.
Yeah.
They really are.
Jason's already, I think he's on Amazon, or he's already in some he's already got a big media job, traditional big media job already. So,
and I think it's fair to say that Travis Kelce was always a bigger name of the two, in terms of football, probably. But
he plays a more sexier position too.
Yeah, and he was, the Chiefs have been in Super Bowls and the Eagles have not, except
he won one. Jason Kelce won one.
Yeah, I know, except for the one. But I think Travis has been a much higher profile.
Patrick Mahomes, playoff catches.
Point. Yeah, that's my point. But they have the personality for it. And it just goes to show, like Pat McAfee proves that you don't have to be a Hall of Fame or high profile player to be good in broadcast media. Pat McAfee was a punter that nobody would remember Pat McAfee at all if he didn't have this podcast. And he's actually, he does it in a unique style that is grating on some people, but I personally think he's pretty good and he's well liked. And his contract's weird and with ESPN and it's been controversial, but point is you don't need to be a Hall of Fame player to be good at something like this. So these two guys are genuinely good at it. And I do agree with you that kind of in general terms, I mean, Taylor Swift connection might have driven up the price a little bit, but they were going to get a big deal no matter what. It was from
They got to be
somebody.
broken up next week. So like, like that would be kind of dumb
Yeah.
of Wondery / Amazon to, if that's what you're banking on, then that would be a stupid bet.
Yeah. And that's not what this is.
No.
I think loosely the fact that Travis Kelce is a more high profile person now than he was a year ago or whatever it was probably factors into it a little bit, but not
remember,
a ton.
as we entered last NFL season, where I don't know what they were doing in their private lives, but at least it wasn't publicly known that they were together. He was the number one pitch man, and you think about opening weekend last year, you watch those commercials, it was Travis Kelce, Travis Kelce, Travis Kelce, and this is pre-relationship.
He has a very outgoing personality,
Yeah.
and he's very good on camera. He's not Tom Brady, on camera.
He's
boring.
Greg Olsen.
Yeah, well, he's even more gregarious than Greg Olsen, though.
Yeah, I would say so.
And I think, and Travis, and they both come across as like sort of Rob Gronkowski-esque, which is like the dumb athlete who is probably going to fail his high school algebra 2 test, but he's well liked and well loved and is prepared and is gregarious and presents well. That's who.
And
these
it's also
two
the
guys
relationship of them as brothers too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big part of what drives. But and one interesting thing about this deal is if you were used to watching New Heights on YouTube, or you were used to getting the RSS feed into your Apple Podcast feed or your Spotify feed, none of that's going to change.
Nope. Now, this column mentions that it's a 3-year agreement, $100 million, which for those of you math efficient comes out to $33 million a year and change. It says it will see the company take global control of global distribution for all future and past episodes of New Heights, in addition to securing, quote, exclusive rights to monetize and distribute audio and video podcast episodes. So in other words, Wondery can sell this show all over the place, which they will do. And so Kelce and the Kelces are going to get their 100 million. And then Wondery sells the show and keeps all the income from the show, which somebody has decided they can make more than 100 million in 3 years distributing the show all over the place. So it's actually pretty smart, I think. It's a decent model, because they're going to get new customers into Wondery, but any income they have from selling it to YouTube or whoever else it is,
plus the ads on it too.
Plus the ads, yeah. So it's pretty smart. They're banking on the fact that this is a popular show, but it's already proven to be a success.
Yeah, they bought the numbers it already had. Of course, they would like to grow them, but that's what they're buying.
Yep. And let's see, Travis and Jason have a statement here. It says, we couldn't be more excited to team up with Wondery for the next phase of New Heights. We love this show and the fan base that has grown with us over the last 2 seasons. Wondery understands that a shared vision. Wondery understands the shared vision will offer a wealth of experience and resources to take us to new heights. We're going to create some groundbreaking moments together through this partnership. We are thrilled to start season 3. See you soon, 92%ers. I don't know. That must be some show insider thing. I don't know what that means. But here is, I think, more, that's just a nothing statement written by some PR guy.
Yeah.
But the CEO of Wondery says something that's pretty interesting. Jen Sargent, she says, New Heights on the surface is a sports podcast, and sports is such a well-listed category, but it's become a cultural phenomenon. They're in that cultural zeitgeist. And that she's not even referring to Taylor Swift. She's just referring to the fact that Travis and Jason Kelce have kind of graduated from just being known to sports people and have become something of a cultural. They've become ingrained in pop culture. So what you're going to see is this show is not going to just be about football.
No,
they're going to have
wasn't yet,
but it's going to be more so pop culture, movie stars.
And Amazon are starting to siphon their guests there.
Yeah, the Amazon broadcasts, Amazon Prime shows and stuff. That is what it's going to be, and I think they would be smart to embrace that. Because it's a much wider platform for them than just like let's talk about the Bears or whatever.
Yeah, and I think they'll have no problem with that. I mean, quick, even NFL, football heads, name a more popular center.
Oh, no. But I mean, the only one I could think of would be Jeff Saturday.
That's a good one. That's a good comp. Yeah, and he's on media. Yeah, that's a good comp. But but that's 2 in 20 years.
Exactly, because it's just all these interior offensive linemen. Think about how much that hurt. Like Washington had multiple people in their glory years of the Hogs who were Hall of Fame worthy, but none of them were big personalities. They were all like blue collar workman type, and it really, I think, hurt them in Hall of Fame voting. It hurt them as individuals in terms of marketing and whatnot. Because that's just the way a lot of interior offensive linemen are. And Jason was like that to an extent too. And again, I think Travis being a different position, playing catching touchdowns for Patrick Mahomes, kind of brought the two of them up a little bit in that regard. Otherwise, I think if Travis didn't exist, Jason Kelce might just be another goofy offensive lineman.
Yeah, maybe, probably, or at least, or not at the stratosphere level.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
$100 million podcast contract.
Because Jeff Saturday comes across a little differently to me than does Jason Kelce. Jason Kelce comes off to me again like Rob Gronkowski, not academically bright perhaps, but gregarious and fun to be around. Jeff Saturday comes across a little bit more intellectual. I think
he's more of an executive type.
Yes, right. And so they're different personalities, I think.
Well, there we go. We've done our deep dive on the popularity of centers and came up with two.
This is the only time anybody's ever said this in the history of the United States.
You got to go back to Jim Otto, and he's probably known for more sadness at this point than what his post-playing career. Steve, we don't want to spend too much time on this, but we talked about some very explicit deals here. Let's talk about a non-deal just quickly. Why don't you give everyone an update about, is the PGA and what we formerly was known as Live Golf have slow rolled whatever partnership, but we got a little bit of news, non-news as news.
Yeah, you just said it right. The news is that there's no news. This is this The Athletic? I think this is The Athletic. PGA Tour PF working without deadline for agreement by Gabby Herzig, Wednesday, August 28th. Now, we talked about this, a year ago at least, and we mentioned that PGA Tour and the PIF, which again is the alter ego of the Saudi and what's it called? The Saudi Investment Fund, the Saudi government's private equity group.
Yeah.
And remember, they had siphoned off a bunch of PGA Tour stars, Phil Mickelson and a bunch of others, and paid them obscene amounts of money to join Live Golf, and it became this huge controversy, and PGA basically banned these people from participating in PGA golf. And then the two competing powers got together, and some people viewed it as PGA and Live Golf had reached an agreement. What I told you guys a long time ago is all they reached really was most likely a term sheet that they had to negotiate. And what the announcement in this article here, the Athletic column mentions, is that PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan said there's no deadline for ongoing negotiations. What that means is the term sheet is still active. They're still negotiating it, but you don't just throw together multi-billion-dollar international sports league in a month. This kind of stuff takes a while. And apparently the original LOI had a deadline of December 31st, 2023. That's come and gone.
Yeah, I think we reported when they kicked that can down the road.
Yeah, I think we said it brief. I don't know if we did a whole segment. We did say it. So what Jay Monahan is saying is they continue to kick down the can down the road because we want to make all the money, with this. So that's the update.
And I think they have yes, I would agree with all that. And when, I don't know if it was a side benefit or one of the things they were hoping for, but I think one of the things that it has resulted in is it's taken that war between those two competing golf leagues and those players where they can play off the headline. So
which was most important.
Yeah. So they bought themselves the kind of time and really the sort of, flying under the radar for them to get this figured out while not really hurting the game in the short term. Well, the sport in the short term.
But they need to figure out the long term, because as we said a year ago, the idea of having a global golf league is much more financially, beneficial to them to have, call it whatever you want. The PGA PIF tour can go from Oklahoma to Tokyo, and it's all under one banner. That's obviously much better for the global growth of the game.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So
we'll just have to get past that pesky, Saudi anti-women group that's investing in it. Everybody's long forgotten about that.
Oh yeah, we've moved on. So they've got
It doesn't matter, right? Who cares? Women's rights, whatever.
They've effectively taken themselves out of the headlines, which I think is the breathing room they needed to get whatever
But
money
it's
they
not
did.
permanent. They need to get the deal done, and they
Oh
will. I
yeah,
believe me. I've done these lots. Okay, not obviously I'm not involved. I don't represent anybody in this, but these type of deals, just deals generally, it will get done. It's just very complicated, and it just takes time.
well, speaking of time, what are the new regular season Hogsty publishing and broadcasting schedule?
Well, it's the our broadcast schedule is going to be the same as it was. We're starting a regular season, so we will have game wrap up and game preview will be released every Thursday on the Hogside podcast, and we'll have all of our regular written content, which will include game previews, game recaps, analysis, whatnot. And I must say, before we sign off, I had to go back and insert Northwest Stadium on all of my game previews, but I couldn't be happier to waste that time to do that because I had actually, honest to God, Chris, I had written on the game preview, I'd written Seaward Stadium, Raljon, Maryland, because I could not.
Commander Stadium.
I couldn't do it. Yeah. So I'm very happy. Whatever it is, north anything is better. So I'm happy about that. Happy to do it.
And good on Josh Harris. I think this was a smart. They're making more than they did from FedEx. It's a local business or has deep roots locally. And I think it's a smart partnership. Now, outside of the fact that you can laugh at Northwest Stadium in the Mid-Atlantic,
it's kind of funny. Yeah.
That's funny, but not like in a bad, bad way. It's actually kind of hysterical, but good for them. I didn't expect them to get a naming rights deal ahead of.
Oh no, I didn't either. No, we could probably do a whole other segment on it, which we don't have time for. But yeah, I didn't either because the stadium's not going to have an NFL team here one way or the other in 5-6 years.
Right, and they're not buying themselves to the new stadium with this deal. I think it's a big feather, and I think it's probably the biggest off the field win for Josh Harris since he bought the team.
Yeah, I think it was 7-8 million. I think was the price, and that's not a ton in naming rights deals, but I mean that's more than he was going to get, which is zero. So
and more than he would have got if FedEx had stayed.
Yeah, right. So.
Well, there we go. So hat tip Josh Harris. Let's keep the positive vibes rolling, and we will see you in 2 weeks.